Postscript. By chance, I wrote these last words on the rim of Vesuvius, right near Pompeii, less than 8 days ago. For more than 20 years, each time I returned to Naples, I thought of her. Who better than Gradiva, I said to myself this time, the Gradiva of Jensen and of Freud, could illustrate this outbidding in the Mal D archive. Illustrate it where it is no longer proper to Freud and to this concept of the archive, where it marks in its very structure, and this is a last supplementary thesis, the formation of every concept, the very history of conception. When he wants to explain the haunting of the archaeologist with the logic of repression, at the very moment in which he specifies that he wants to recognize in it a germ or a parcel of truth, Freud claims again to bring to light a more originary origin than that of the spectre. In the outbidding, he wants to be an archivist who is more of an archaeologist than the archaeologist. And, of course, closer to the ultimate cause, a better etiologist than his novelist. He wants to exhume a more archaic impression, he wants to exhibit a more ARI 97 chaic imprint than the one the other archaeologists of all kinds bustle around, those of literature and those of classical objective science, an imprint that is singular each time, an impression that is almost no longer an archive but almost confuses itself with the pressure of the footstep that leaves its still living mark on a substrate, a surface, a place of origin. When the step is still one with the subjectal. In the instant when the printed archive is yet to be detached from the primary impression in its singular, irreproducible, and archaic origin. In the instant when the imprint is yet to be left, abandoned by the pressure of the impression. In the instant of the pure auto-affection, in the indistinction of the active and the passive, of a touching and a touched. An archive which would in some confuse itself with the arc, with the origin of which it is only the type, the typos, the iterable letter or character. An archive without archive, where, suddenly indiscernible from the impression of its imprint, Gradiva's footstep speaks by itself. Now this is exactly what Hanold dreamed of in his disenchanted archaeologist's desire, in the moment when he awaited the coming of the midday ghost. Hanold suffers from archive fever. He has exhausted the science of archaeology. He had, the novel says, become a master in the art of deciphering the most indecipherable, the most enigmatic graffiti, in der Ensafjahrenschwer and Tratzelberg graffiti. But he had had enough of his science and of his abilities. His impatient desire rebelled against their positivity as if before death. This science itself was of the past. What it taught, he said to himself, is a lifeless archaeological intuition, die Fos archaeophagisch anschauen. And in the moment when Pompeii comes back to life, when the dead awake, die Toten wachten auf, und Pompeii fingen, wieder sie leben, Hanold understands everything. He understands why he had traveled through Rome and Naples. He begins to know, wissen, what he did not then know, namely his intimate drive or impulse. And this knowledge, this comprehension, this deciphering of the interior desire to decipher which drove him onto Pompeii, all of this comes back to him in an act of memory, Erinnerung. He recalls that he came to see if he could find her traces, the traces of Gradiva's footsteps, ober hier spuren von ihr auffinden kann. Now here is a point which is never taken into account, neither in Jensen's reading nor in Freud's, and this point confounds more than it distinguishes. Hanold has come to search for these traces in the literal sense, I'm word like in sin. He dreams of bringing back to life. He dreams rather of reliving. But of reliving the other. Of reliving the singular pressure or impression which Gradiva's step repose, the step itself, the step of Gradiva herself, that very day, at that time, on that date, in what was inimitable about it, must have left in the ashes. He dreams this irreplaceable place, the very ash, where the singular imprint, like a signature, barely distinguishes itself from the impression. And this is the condition of singularity, the idiom, the secret, testimony. It is the condition for the uniqueness of the printer printed, of the impression and the imprint, of the pressure and its trace in the unique instant where they are not yet distinguished the one from the other, forming in an instant a single body of Gradiva's step, of her gait, of her pace, Gongard, and of the ground which carries them. The trace no longer distinguishes itself from its substrate. No longer distinguishing between themselves, this pressure and this imprint differ henceforth from all other impressions, from all other imprints, and from all other archives. At least that imprint, Abdruck, distinct from all the others, must be rediscovered, but this presupposes both memory and the archive, the one and the other as the same, right on the same subjectal in the field of excavations. It must be resuscitated right where, in an absolutely safe location, in an irreplaceable place, it still holds, right on the ash, not yet having detached itself, the pressure of Gradiva's so singular step. This is what Hanold the archaeologist means in a literal sense by the literal sense. In the literal sense, I'm Wertetian sin, the story says, something came into his consciousness for the first time zum ersten Mal, without being aware himself of the impulse within him, he had come to Italy and had traveled on to Pompeii, without stopping in Rome or Naples, in order to see whether he could find any traces of her. And traces in the literal sense lim word like in sinel, for with her peculiar gait she must have left behind an imprint Abdruckle of her toes in the ashes distinct I-99 from all the rest. SE 9, 65, transmodified J2222. I'm word like in sin, den Bayer besonderen Gongard muss Saint Sie in der Erschienen von allen Ibergen sich unterscheidenden Abdruckers ein hinterlassen haben. This uniqueness does not resist. Its price is infinite. But infinite in the immense, incommensurable extent to which it remains unfindable. The possibility of the archiving trace, this simple possibility, can only divide the uniqueness, separating the impression from the imprint. Because this uniqueness is not even a past present. It would have been possible, one can dream of it after the fact, only insofar as its iterability, that is to say, its imminent divisibility, the possibility of its fission, haunted it from the origin. The faithful memory of such a singularity can only be given over to the spectre. Is fiction outdone here? Does it lack knowledge? Did Jensen know less about this than Freud? 23 and Hanold? One can always dream or speculate around a secret account. Speculation begins there and belief. But of the secret itself, there can be no archive, by definition. The secret is the very ash of the archive, the place where it no longer even makes sense to say the very ash ia centra meme or write on the ash a meme fa centra dot. There is no sense in searching for the secret of what anyone may have known. A fortune or a character, Hanold the archaeologist. That is what this literature attests. So here is a singular testimony, literature itself, an inheritor escaped or emancipated from the scriptures. Here is what it gives us to think, the inviolable 23. It is known that Freud did not fail to take up this question. With a strategy at times disconcerting, he does justice to it in its general form on more than one occasion, but also with this example here in his text on Jensen's Gradiva. Because Jensen, as he notes, proposes an etiology and a genealogy of Hanold's delusion. Do they hold up in the face of science? After having proposed, in a provocative and deliberately surprising fashion, to reverse the terms, it is science that does not hold up in the face of fiction, Freud complicates things. He proposes to ally himself, as the scholar of a new science, and much better armed, with the novelist. The latter will not be alone if I may count my own works as part of science, Freud says, and if he can leave his provisional isolation. A note from 1912 remarks that this isolation is coming to an end. The psychoanalytic movement started by me has become widely extended, and it is constantly growing. SE 9, 53. The same question is set out from another point of view in chapter 4, which ends at the edge of an obvious fact forgotten along the way, but we must stop here, or we may really forget that Hanold and Gradiva are only creatures of their author's mind. SE 9:93. Elsewhere, from another point of view, we will take up these texts and these questions of meta-interpretative outbidding. Secret of Gradiva, of Hanold, of Jensen, and then of Freud and of a few others. Beyond every possible and necessary inquiry, we will always wonder what Freud, for example, what every careful concealer may have wanted to keep secret. We will wonder what he may have kept of his unconditional right to secrecy, while at the same time burning with the desire to know, to make known, and to archive the very thing he concealed forever. What was concealed? What did he conceal even beyond the intention to conceal, to lie, or to perjure? We will always wonder what, in this mal archive, he may have burned. We will always wonder, sharing with compassion in this archive fever, what may have burned of his secret passions, of his correspondence, or of his life. Burned without him, without remains and without knowledge. With no possible response, be it spectral or not, short of or beyond a suppression, on the other edge of repression, originary or secondary, without a name, without the least symptom, and without even an ash. Naples, 22 to 28 May 1994.